Last week, President Trump reportedly told some senators he thought the House version of health care reform was mean. This week, as senators get ready to drop their version of the bill, it is unclear if the president was given a heads up about what's in it. But we're learning more about what the White House hopes to see. Here's what White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer had to say.
I mean, the president clearly wants a bill that has heart in it. He believes that health care is something that is near and dear to so many families and individuals. He made it clear from the beginning that that was one of his priorities, and as the Senate works its way through this bill, as the House did, any ideas are welcome to strengthen it, to make it more affordable, more accessible, and deliver the care that it needs. But this is an area that the president believes passionately about. He cares. He understands the role that health care plays in so many people's lives and their families, and he wants to make sure that we do everything we can to provide the best option for him as Obamacare continues to fail.
Well, earlier I spoke to Time White House correspondent Zeke Miller about the White House's involvement in crafting this bill.
They're, not necessarily directly involved in the drafting of it, but they're pretty close to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, whose office is spearheading the drafting of the Senate version of this with that group of 13 Republican senators. Vice President Mike Pence was up there today. Certainly there are conversations. The White House, knows what's the broad outlines of what could potentially be in that bill, but it's not really clear. I mean, the Senate is talking about potentially having draft language ready by Thursday, but there's still last-minute haggling going up to the very brink there in terms of getting something approaching consensus among the very disparate and sort of divided Senate Republican caucus. I mean, the divide between a Susan Collins and a Rob Portman on this issue and a Ted Cruz and Mike Lee may be unbridgeable, and that something the White House has faced in the House, but in the Senate, every vote for Republicans is far more important than a single vote in the House. So they're monitoring it, but they just like Mitch McConnell, they don't really necessarily have the solution there.
All right, Zeke, let's talk about some international news. President Trump has often been criticized for his Twitter diplomacy. Here's a look at what he tweeted on Tuesday. The president said, quote, "While I greatly appreciate the efforts of President Xi and China to help with North Korea, it has not worked out. At least I know China tried." The tweet coming after the death of Otto Warmbier, the American student who was released from North Korea in a coma. How do you see comments like this impacting the U.S.-China relationship?
Certainly, from the Chinese perspective, already we're starting to see this being interpreted as a snub, as a sign that China, which had particularly after the U.S. sort of trying to back out of the Paris climate change agreement, was seen as a moment for China to become a Senate on the global stage. The president had sort of made a very big show of trying to empower the Chinese government here when it came to the North Korea issue, and here the president is sort of saying, you tried to become a player on the global stage and you failed, but nice try. It's certainly the sort of thing that will not be viewed favorably over there. But it's true that the White House has not seen the sort of progress that they were hoping from China on the North Korea issue. And so it is sort of an interesting message from the president to sort of do this sort of diplomacy publicly. He's trying to apply further pressure on Beijing to see the preferred outcome. But it's unclear whether or not that will actually do that, or it will be counterproductive and cause some sort of breakdown and friction in that relationship.
So, Zeke, the White House confirms that Jared and Ivanka Trump have been invited to China in the fall. They did point out that Jared was instrumental in setting up President Xi's visit to Mar-a-Lago. It's not clear whether they've accepted that invitation. We also know that Mr. Kushner is headed to the Middle East. What's your take on that? Isn't that the role of the Secretary of State?
In a lot of ways, yes, in a traditional administration, but we've seen for so many months now, this is not a traditional administration. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump have an outsized role within the White House. They are sort of bridging the divide between senior staff and members of the family, and sort of extensions of the president himself. They're surrogates. They are diplomats in part. So we're seeing, their portfolio is massive and meaningless at the same time. They're just as they're as important as the president wants to give them weight, and sort of just as easily written off if they seem to be counterproductive, because because it's not the Secretary of State. So there is pressure to get, to see something there. At the same time, it can be completely, it's deniable in the sense that it can just be a diplomatic or a symbolic visit rather than any sort of, we don't necessarily see deliverables coming out of it. Even with Jared Kushner's visit to the Middle East, there's no sense of clear deliverables. So if something does come out of it, then it's, the president's progeny are sort of, making some big global, making big global agreements and making progress on these intractable issues, or sort of if nothing does come out of it, the expectations weren't that high to begin with.
Massive and meaningless. I see that as the next headline in your next piece for Time, Zeke. Zeke Miller in Washington. As always, my friend, we thank you.
Thank you.